Okay, so now it's time for fletching, and fletching is basically putting feathers on the end of your arrow shaft to create drag. Creating drag makes the arrowhead go straight, makes it go in a straight line in the direction that you want it to go. This is an arrow that I did a couple of years ago with a Keokuk tip that I napped on here. And the fletching on here, I chose this one because it was really extreme. And what fletching does is you want to make sure that you get it from the same wing or same side, or that they're perfectly flat either way. If we're using the wing feathers, they're going to be curved, and there's a right wing and a left wing, and they're going to curve in different directions. And what the curvature does is it causes the arrow to spin in the air, which then creates kind of like rifling. So in the bore of rifles, there's grooves. In the bore of mini firearms, there's grooves that are cut in there, which causes the round of the bullet to spin. Putting a spin on the bullet helps the bullet go further and straighter, making it more accurate. And so that's what you want to be mindful of when you're using feathers as fletching on the ends of your arrow shafts. Some of the fletching, again, these are some examples of from turkey feather here, and they're from the same side. May not be the same bird, but they're from the same side. There is a curvature to them, and what I want to do is I want 3 of these that are going to be in the same curvature. Alright, so that's very kind of an important point there. And what I have here is I have an old cutting board that I've used some years ago when I was making a lot of arrows, and on here I have kind of mapped out the size that I like to use with this this line here and this line here. And they correspond with about roughly how long I want my fletch. Okay, so what I'm gonna do then is what I like to do then, and this is a turkey feather, is I'll take my cutting tool and really sharp piece of obsidian. To make this go real quick, I'm just using a utility blade, and I find the groove here, and I can pretty much just kind of split. Be careful, but I can split up the vein, the middle of this arrow, or excuse me, of the feather, and go right up the middle. And that's kind of a quick way to split these out all the way to the very tip, like so. And then now I have 2 possible fletches, but what will happen is they'll be on opposite ends, so I can't use these 2 together based on what I was just talking about. They won't match. As you can see, they won't match. Okay, so this would be for one and this would be for another, but all 3 pieces of fletching need to be from the same side. Okay, they need to turn the same side. So what I have here now is I have some that I've already pre-made, and I can kind of match these up for the length and everything. So and then I'll pull out a ruler and get some exact dimensions for those of you that like that kind of thing. So I can kind of map this out, take my X-Acto blade and cut this. I don't discard this. This could be fletching for a smaller arrow or another different type of project. So I don't really need to discard that per se right now. And then on the other end, and then here, I'm taking off a bit of the feathers from the top there, like so. I'm taking these down, so we end up having it shaved like that. Okay. And then from the back end, I'm going to do the same thing. So I want them to approximately to be the same length. And there's people out there that are more exact than me, and that's fine. I mean, that's where you kind of get the last name Fletcher from. I believe it's an English last name, and I'm sure that's what that family did, was they made arrows and provided fletching for the arrows. And so there's going to be very exacting about this, and there's nothing wrong with this. This is educational and for demos. I'm not trying to win any awards with these at all. So at any rate, we have the shaft here that we want to kind of shave down, and you can oftentimes do that with some sandpaper. Thought I had some here, or your blade. So oftentimes I can take a sandpaper and I can sand these down like so. Okay. One thing about this pithy part of the arrow, or the feather, you don't want to inhale that. So wear a mask. Do this in a ventilated area. It's not good for your lungs. It's not good for you. The pithy part is not good for you. So we can sand this down so that it's fairly flat, or we can take our X-Acto blade and kind of shape it the way that we need it. Get it the shape that we need it, so that it sits properly on the arrow shaft. There's many different ways to split these the feathers. I keep saying arrows. And I've got a few videos out on the different ways that you can do this. And I'll include those, I'll provide those links if you want to view those videos. I don't want to go into all the different variations. I found over the year that just the construction of archery equipment is vast, and there's lots that we could talk about and go into, and lots of details. And I'm just trying to give a general overview, kind of just something quick and dirty that you can do, something that'll work. When you get into the idiosyncrasies and the math and the science that's involved in it, and that's what being a bowyer, which is a person who makes bows, is about. So it's a whole nother lifetime, whole nother vocation, I feel. And then oftentimes what I like to do is I like to cut a little bit of a point on each side like this. Okay. Just a little bit. And I can shave off some of the pith here. Okay. Like that. So that's how I dress up my fletching, like that. Okay, so I'm gonna get you some dimensions for those of you that are interested in the exact sizes and things like that. Just pull out a ruler quickly. And so I'm having these be at approximately 6 inches long. Okay, so they're about 6 inches long. They don't have to be that long, or they could be longer. These are like 6 inches long. I'm giving an allowance from the top to where the feathers start at about 1/4 of an inch. So I'm about 1/4 of an inch in from here to where the feathers start. And then on the back end, that might be the same. I think it did the same. Yeah, and that's about 1/4 of an inch as well. So 1/4 of an inch, make it bald, 1/4 of an inch on each side, and then this fletching is 6 inches long. And that's kind of what Okay, what I have here is some artificial sinew. I really wish that I had some real backstrap sinew, and I may order some. I don't have any left from a harvest that I got some years ago to show you how sinew functions when you're using it to make primitive arrows. But the artificial sinew, which is just waxed nylon, actually works pretty well, and it kind of simulates it a little bit. The only difference is that real sinew has natural glues that when you wet it and then it dries, it bonds to itself and even shrinks. This doesn't, because this is just nylon. But what you can do, you want to get the flat waxed nylon if you choose to go that route, because you have to get the sinew from the animal. And that's the backstrap that's under the loin that runs along the back. They give the longest fibers. The sinew that you want for backing bows, you really want the kind of the Achilles tendon one. Those are denser and thicker, but they're shorter. And what I'm doing is when you get the flat artificial sinew, you can split it down the middle to make it really thin, which is what we want to do. We want this really thin. And I have a length that's probably about maybe 5 or 6 feet long. So I'm just cutting that. I have this pre-made, so I have my sinew. This might not be very visible on the camera, but what I will do is I'm going to switch the backgrounds here so this is more visible. Okay, this should be a little better. It should be more visible to see what's going on. All right, so what we want to do is we want to first take our fletching and we want to take the end here and we want to bend it down. We want to let it, you know, put a 90 degree bend on it. Okay, so we want to just kind of get these prepared. Okay. We'll bend these down right at where they are, right there. Okay. That's what we want to do. Just want to put a bend in it. Feathers are remarkably light but tough. They're kind of durable. They're really interesting how birds have evolved. These feathers are amazing. That's what makes them fly. It's kind of cool stuff. But there we go. So we want to put bends in them like that. Alright. And then we want to take the arrow shaft. Now we're going to dress this one. And this is the end that I want here. And when we look at this, we want to make a triangle, an equilateral triangle. We want one, we'll point this directly at the camera. We want one to be 90 degrees from one of the lips here. So we want one 90 degrees here, and then 30 degrees from that we want one, I'm going to use my scissors to point, we want one to sit here on this plane, and we want one 30 degrees from that plane. So if you think of an equilateral triangle, we want one arrow to, or excuse me, one fletch, one feather to lay parallel, or excuse me, perpendicular to this side here. Then we want one to come off the bottom at about 30 degrees, and then another to come from the top at about 30 degrees. Okay, and the reason why is the one that's sticking out 90 degrees from this lip here is what we call our cock feather, and that's the one that's out away from the bow. So this is the back of the bow. So we don't want the feathers to rub onto the bow, because what will happen is it throws the trajectory of the arrow off. So what we want to do is we want to have these two feathers on this side like this, so that they slide against the bow like so, and then the other feather is off perpendicular from it, so it's not being in the way. Okay. Oftentimes that's denoted by different colors. I could do a different color feather from like a different animal, for example, a different bird. But for this purpose, I'm going to go ahead and stick with all three of these here. All right, so they'll be the same. Okay. So what I'm going to do here is, what I do first is I go ahead and I make a just kind of a double overhand knot with our artificial sinew, our cordage, double or triple overhand knot. And then what I want to do is I want these to lay approximately in the position and where, you know, enough for your fingers to go. So I would say what, about 1.5 inches away. All right, so they're not in the way, because you don't want to be rustling your arrows if you're hunting, or you're fletching if you're hunting. You're just making more noise than necessary, right? So what I can do then is I'm gonna just shimmy this up. Shimmy this up the side here, and then just attach that. Okay, and all I'm doing is just wrapping it around. Make that tight. Okay, and then I want to make sure that this is the first one we put on. This is going to be our cock feather, so that's going to be perpendicular to one of the lips, and then I just go ahead and I just start wrapping like that. So start wrapping, and then we take another one and we seat it. Let's see, that's where it's perpendicular from, so we're going to seat it about 30 degrees next to it, like so. And I add a wrap to that. And then I go another 30 degrees and I add the last one. Seat it next to it where it bends. And I continue my wrap like that. So at this point, I can start kind of wrapping these so that they're tightly bound in place. And then I can start to lay these down, and I can see how these are going to lay out onto the shaft. And if I need to make any adjustments, then this is the time to do it before we completely tie these down or secure these down. All right, so this is one method of doing this. There's lots of ways to do it, and this is one method I like to do. All right, and then this is far enough away to where my fingers won't disturb the fletching and make up too much noise.